EPZ K9. This one actually came from a fan's comment. And I was curious myself, so I bought this one for the review. The packaging is bold and colorful, with lots of visual punch. And when you open it, the faceplate is just as striking. EPZ says the inner panel of the faceplate is made of hand-brushed foil, but in practice, I find maybe it's because the resin layer above the hand-brushed foil is like too thick. It's literally dulling the reflective effects of the foil. And the foil itself also seems to be just a single layer or so, due to the size limitation. So instead of that rich multi-layer sparkle you get from something like TH900, it only catches the light at certain angles. Plus, the plastic frame surrounding the foil panel doesn't exactly scream premium. If this were done by a metal frame and a more reflective foil, it would have been a real stunner. And by the way, if you buy the K9 here in China, you can actually customize the shell. You can change the frame color, you can change the shell color, or even add your own pattern on panel if you like. So I wouldn't complain much about it if I bought it here in China. The driver config looks solid, 1DD with 8 BA. What surprised me the most, however, is the weight. This thing is super light, easily one of the lightest IEM I've ever reviewed. Holding it in your hand, you almost feel like you're holding nothing at all. On graph, it really doesn't line up with the JM1 at all. Instead, it hugs the Harman target pretty closely. If you refer the JM1 preference bounds, there are only 3 spots where it goes off the line. One dip at 500Hz, sitting in the lower mids, mainly affecting vocals and instrument body. And then 2 peaks at 6000Hz and 13000Hz, which I'll get into later when I talk about actual listening impression. As for the tuning style, I very much agree with what most people have been saying. It has a W-shaped tuning, decent sub-bass depths, good vocal clarity, and bright treble. Now, what's interesting is that, although I also find it a W-shaped tuning as well, as sub-bass reaches decent depths, while ear to chin. Not the deepest, but it's really bouncy. It's like you throw a ball to the ground and it will rebound back to you, that kind of feeling. Now, what's interesting is that, although I also find it a W-shaped tuning as well, the bass isn't actually emphasized. I mean, bass quantity isn't massive at all. Punch impact is on the mild side, sometimes even feel a bit soft. Yet somehow you can always notice the bass. It stands out with a very clean and well-defined image. So even though no single aspect of bass is exaggerated, it still grabs my attention somehow. Overall, the mids lean slightly toward the female vocals, and that actually lines up with what Graph told us earlier. That dip around 500Hz trims off some of the weight of the vocals, so vocals comes across lighter and more transparent, pairing really nicely with female vocals. And just like the BGVP Solomon, vocals sit a bit forward. Compared to the JM1, the gain between 600Hz and 1000Hz is higher, which pushes the vocal image forward and make it sound a bit larger in imagery. Now about that peak around 6000Hz. This one sitting outside the preference bounds. And theoretically, this will boost upper mid clarity, sibilance, and edge definition of notes. And actually it does make hi-hats and cymbals sound crisper and brighter. And that's pretty much the same as what I heard. And in theory, this boost can exaggerate sibilance as well. But since the whole 5000 to 8000 Hz range rolls off gradually and it sits a bit below the Harman. So the sibilance control is actually pretty good. It's all under control. Most of the time you don't hear sibilance. Only when a singer really stresses those sounds, then you will hear it. But luckily it's not aggressive. As for instruments like guitar and woodwind, clarinet, basson and the like, the detail retrieval is clear, and the edges of each note are clearly drawn. The treble region is basically as high as Harman, which means it comes across as quite bright. Extension goes up high enough that when the music hits those treble region, you get this sense of the sound just climbing up and up. Extension is quite impressive. That said, it doesn't really push for extra sparkle. Treble isn't overly emphasized actually, because the highest note doesn't come off sharp or piercing. And looking at the graph, there's a noticeable peak around 13,000 Hz that stick out of the preference bound. That's mostly tied to how the handle is. And yeah, you can feel it. There's a sense of air in the presentation, but it mainly shows up when things are already playing in the higher treble region. It's not every note is with that blanket of air wraps around it, so I'd say it's not overly emphasized. It's just you can feel it at certain region.
Night and day, under the height of me, there is such a hungry yearning burning inside of me.
The soundstage here is impressively wide, with good depth and clear defined layering. Normally I would spend quite a while breaking down this staging, but this time I just leave it this short, and that should tell you how good it really is. Now for the usual ominous talk. The problem we see mainly lies in bass and treble. The bass, while you can easily sense them, it feels a little on the soft side. It could use a bit more punch and slam in my opinion. As for the treble, it's basically line with the Harman, so it links bright. The good news is that it's rendered smoothly, not aggressively or piercing. Still, if you are especially sensitive to brighter highs, this might be something to keep in mind. Overall, very impressive. The performance here goes well beyond what you'd expect at this price point. And back to the question asked at the beginning, does it give the Mega 5 a short run for the money? Yes. And that's the end of this video. Thanks for watching and happy listening. See you next time.